Imagine getting an eviction notice, right? But the envelope is it's clearly marked spam.
Oh, wow. Okay, so you just toss it practically.
Exactly. You completely ignore it. And by the time you finally realize what's actually inside, and you open it up, your furniture is literally already out on the sidewalk.
Right. It's too late.
It's way too late. And according to Dr. Jaime Hoerricks, for an autistic person who is just trying to navigate their own physical needs, that is exactly what it feels like to simply be hungry.
Man, that's heavy.
Right. So, welcome to today's deep dive. We are exploring this really profound, deeply personal text that just completely reframes this cliche idea of, listening to your body.
Yeah, because for a lot of people, tuning into their physical self, it isn't just some simple act of mindfulness.
No, not at all.
It's a physiological impossibility. And that completely shatters this baseline assumption that most of us just kind of walk around with, that our bodies are reliable, perfectly tuned two-way radios.
Yeah, we just assume the signal's always good.
Exactly. So the source material we're pulling from today is an excerpt called The Body Told Me Late. It's part of a larger series titled The First Autistic Person, and it's written by Dr. Hoerricks.
Which is just a brilliant text, honestly.
It really is. Through her lived experience, we're decoding the often misunderstood world of autistic sensory processing. But, on a much deeper level, we're examining how society takes these invisible biological delays and moralizes them.
Right, turning a physiological misfire into, a character flaw.
Exactly. We turn a misfire into a question of a person's character.
Okay, let's unpack this core paradox that Dr. Hoerricks writes about because, it completely stopped me in my tracks when I read it.
Yeah, it's intense.
She describes what happens when your body sends you this urgent message, but it arrives 3 days late.
3 days.
Or going back to that spam folder analogy, it arrives written in a language you literally cannot read. She says some needs simply do not announce themselves until they are already in a state of absolute emergency.
Right, because most of the world assumes a body keeps what she calls a calendar of need.
A calendar of need. I love that phrasing.
It's so accurate, right? Think about your own morning today. You probably drank a cup of coffee because you felt a little sluggish. Or you ate a piece of toast because your stomach gave you that polite little rumble.
Yeah, just a little nudge.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You took that internal calendar completely for granted. It's this schedule you can follow. It eats lunch before the blood sugar completely collapses. It drinks water before the migraine sets in,
Right, it rests before you just completely lose the ability to speak.
Yes. But Dr. Hoerricks reveals a reality where that calendar it does not exist. The needs just whisper until they're absolutely screaming at you.
I'm just trying to wrap my head around the mechanics of this, though. If I haven't eaten, my stomach growls. It's just a reflex.
Right.
So are we saying that for Dr. Hoerricks, that biological doorbell literally doesn't ring? Or is it ringing and the sound is just somehow muted? Because she gives these incredibly vivid examples of crossed wires, like trying to interpret hunger as anxiety, or feeling physical pain, but your brain registers it as irritation.
Yeah, or fear as nausea.
Yeah.
It's wild. So basically, the doorbell is ringing, but the wiring in the house is routing the chime to the completely wrong speaker.
Oh, that's such a good way to put it.
To understand the how and the why here, we really have to look at how the brain processes sensory input, right?
Yeah.
Because the brain is essentially just a prediction machine.
Okay.
In a neurotypical brain, a drop in blood sugar is routed super efficiently to the hypothalamus. And the brain translates that data neatly into this conscious thought of, I am hungry.
Clear and simple.
Exactly. But in an autistic brain with sensory routing differences, that same physiological data might get caught in a massive traffic jam of other sensory inputs.
Like what kind of inputs?
Like the hum of fluorescent lights overhead. Or the texture of a shirt collar on your neck. So the signal gets misrouted. It might bypass the hunger center entirely and just hit the amygdala instead.
Which is the fear and anxiety center of the brain.
Precisely. So the conscious mind, it doesn't register a polite request for a sandwich.
Right.
It registers this sudden, totally unexplained panic.
And the tragedy here isn't that the autistic person lacks awareness or that they don't feel the sensation.
Do you feel it?
They do. It's that they feel it after the body has already crossed the line into crisis. The data simply didn't reach the level of conscious language until the physiological threshold was completely breached.
Which means the person is constantly playing catch-up with their own biology.
Yes, exactly.
I get hangry if I miss lunch by an hour or so, but what she's describing is on a completely different existential
Oh,
level.
totally.
It's not just a bad move, it's a total system failure.
Yeah.
And this actually brings us to the emotional core of this text, which I think is just the shame of it all.
The shame is huge.
Dr. Hoerricks talks about the developmental shame of being a full-grown adult who is just constantly surprised by their own body. Yeah, because society treats body knowledge as this clear sign of maturity, right? There is this relentless echoing chorus from the outside world of, you should have eaten, you should have stopped, you should have known.
Yeah, you should have known. That's the one.
And people might say it out of concern, sure, but underneath the question of, like, why did you let yourself get that tired, is this really brutal assumption.
What assumption?
The assumption is that the signal was available to you, that it was clearly labeled, and you actively, irresponsibly just chose to ignore it.
But wait, how can you know when the data literally wasn't there? I mean, isn't society essentially demanding that a person answer a door when the sound hasn't even reached their ears yet?
That's exactly what they're doing. They're projecting their own internal calendar of need onto a body that operates on an entirely different timeline.
Right.
Because the outside observer, they see the eventual collapse, right? They see the shaking hands from hunger, the shutdown from exhaustion, and they assume the internal warning track was playing that whole time.
So they see the smoke and assume the person just ignored the fire alarm.
Yes, not realizing the alarm itself was completely disconnected.
Man. Okay, so if your internal warning signals are offline or severely delayed, that doesn't just affect your internal health. It literally changes how you physically collide with the world.
Oh, absolutely.
Because you still have to walk through doors, pick up cups, exist in gravity. And this is where her lived experience with proprioception comes in.
Right.
And I know you listening are probably familiar with the term proprioception, but the way she frames it is just entirely different from some sterile clinical definition.
Yeah, she brings it to life. So just to define it real quick, proprioception is the sense of where your body is in space, how much force you're using, like where your limbs end and the environment actually begins.
Okay.
Dr. Hoerricks defines a deficit here, not as, like you said, a vocabulary word, but as the lived fact of missing the body's map.
Missing the map.
Your muscles and joints, they're supposed to be constantly sending these micro updates to your brain about your position. But when that system is unreliable, the map is just blank.
The details she shares about this missing map are incredibly revealing. She talks about discovering a huge bruise on her leg without any memory of how it got there,
Right.
or catching her hip on a doorframe constantly, misjudging the physical force needed to put down a coffee cup so it hits the table way too hard and spills everywhere.
Yeah, I think a lot of people can relate to that clumsiness, but this is systemic.
It honestly sounds exactly like playing a video game with terrible controller lag.
Oh, that's a great comparison.
Right. You press the joystick left, but your character doesn't move on the screen for like 3 whole seconds. So what do? You have to constantly mash the buttons, or you intentionally walk your character into a wall just to figure out where you actually are on the map.
That video game lag is a brilliant way to visualize what she's describing here. The body map is faint. You don't instinctively know how much space you take up in a room, or honestly, where standing ends and falling begins.
That's terrifying.
It is. And this brings us to one of the most powerful insights in her text regarding how autistic individuals actually adapt to this lag. She writes, and I'm quoting here, "The body as an outline drawn again from the outside in."
Drawn again from the outside in. Wow, that line is just haunting.
It really is. And it forces us to completely reevaluate behaviors that are, often pathologized.
What do you mean by that?
Well, when an autistic person seeks deep pressure, or wears a really heavy-weighted blanket, or deliberately makes contact with a hard floor, outsiders often view this as just a childish quirk.
Or worse, like a behavioral issue that needs to be corrected.
Exactly. But it is actually this vital act of physical orientation.
They're mashing the buttons on the controller to get a location ping.
Yes. If you cannot feel where your body ends from the inside, you have to use the physical resistance of the outside world to find your edges.
That makes perfect sense.
Right. The weight of the blanket, the rigidity of the wall, the firmness of the floor, these things provide the structural boundaries that the internal neurological map is just failing to provide. It is literally the act of finding where the body ends and the rest of the world begins.
Okay, so we've mapped the outside of the body now, and we can really see how someone uses pressure to physically locate themselves. But what happens when we turn back inward?
That's where things get really complicated.
Because her interoception, that internal landscape of heart rate, bladder, temperature, She says it's so dialed down. She describes swinging violently between two extreme states.
Right. Dr. Hoerricks breaks this down into the quiet body and the loud body.
Okay, let's start with the quiet body.
So first there is hypointeroception. This is the quiet body. This is where those internal cues we rely on are virtually silent, leading to that late arrival of need that we discussed earlier.
The 3 days late thing?
Exactly. Hunger doesn't present as a polite rumble. It presents as shaking hands and a sudden, overwhelming irritability.
Wow.
Exhaustion doesn't feel like a heavy sigh and a yawn. It feels like the room is physically moving away from you just moments before a complete neurological shutdown.
And the cruelty here is how this gets interpreted by the people around her, you know?
No, completely.
Like, if a coworker sees you dropping your pens because your hands are shaking from a hunger you didn't even know you had, they don't think, hypointeroception.
No, of course not.
They see clumsiness, they see carelessness, they assume you have poor planning skills or just, bad habits.
They assume you are experiencing the exact same internal warning cues they are, and you're just failing to act on them.
Which is so unfair.
It is. But then Dr. Hoerricks flips the coin to the other extreme, which is hyperinteroception.
The loud body.
The loud body. This isn't an absence of signals. It is a terrifying, deafening overabundance of them.
How does she describe it again?
She describes it as a room inside the skin where every object has begun to speak at once.
That is, it's like driving a manual transmission car, but for your organs.
Huh? Yeah.
You have to consciously monitor every single gear shift.
Every single pulse becomes suspect. Every slight shift in body temperature is suddenly a blaring alarm. The sensory bandwidth is just completely maxed out.
I honestly can't even fathom the sheer crushing cognitive load of that interpretation.
It's massive.
Like, if your stomach shifts slightly, you are suddenly forced to play a high-stakes guessing game with your own biology.
Right.
You have to ask, is this hunger? Is it fear? Is it a stomach flu coming on? Is it grief? Or is it just like sensory overload from the flickering fluorescent lights in the grocery store?
Exactly. Every internal sensation demands a conscious interpretation, and you have absolutely no reliable rubric to grade it against.
That sounds exhausting.
It is. And look at how the outside world judges this state, right? This constant state of internal ambiguity, this desperate attempt to categorize overwhelming physical noise. It's almost always misunderstood by outsiders.
How so?
Medical professionals label it as health obsession or hypochondria. Friends might call it anxiety or irritability or emotional excess.
Because they just see the outward reaction.
Right. They see someone obsessing over a minor stomach ache, not realizing that for this person, that stomach ache is a loud, untranslatable siren going off in a room where 50 other sirens are also wailing.
It's exhausting just trying to imagine navigating that for a single afternoon, let alone an entire lifetime.
Yeah.
So if your body is constantly mistranslating these signals or delivering them 3 days late, what happens when you are forced to exist in a society that is built entirely from the ground up on the assumption of perfectly timed needs?
Well, this is where we have to look at the concept of spoons, or basically energy capacity, and how that intersects with this delayed timing.
Okay, wait. For anyone listening who maybe isn't steeped in disability advocacy, let's just clarify the spoon metaphor real quick.
Oh, sure. So it comes from Christine Miserandino's spoon theory, which is a way to describe living with chronic illness and disability.
Right.
Imagine you start the day with a handful of spoons. And every task like showering, commuting, or masking your autistic traits at work, it costs a spoon.
And when you run out, you crash?
Exactly. When you run out of spoons, you crash. What Dr. Hoerricks is adding to this model is that because of her sensory delays, she doesn't actually know she's spending spoons until the drawer is completely empty.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. She might keep pushing forward because the desire to do the task is very real, and the internal physiological warning that she's running on empty simply hasn't arrived yet.
So the aftermath of that invisible depletion has to be devastating.
It is.
Because when the inevitable collapse finally happens, everyone around the person treats that crash as definitive proof that they just failed to care for themselves.
Right. They see a moral failing.
But Dr. Hoerricks writes this line that I really want to highlight, like put in bold and underline for everyone listening. She says, knowing was a thing that failed, not care, not intelligence.
What's fascinating here is how this intimately connects to massive systemic failures.
Oh, definitely.
We aren't just talking about interpersonal judgment from friends or family anymore. We are talking about institutional barriers. Think about healthcare, schools, employers, HR departments.
All the big systems.
Yeah, even the systems specifically designed for disability accommodations. They all rely completely on what Dr. Hoerricks brilliantly calls a clean access story.
A clean access story, meaning like the institution expects you to identify your problem, articulate it clearly, and then they'll graciously provide a solution.
Exactly. The system demands that you know your need early, state it clearly using conventional language, and ask for help long before it actually becomes a crisis.
Which is impossible if you don't have the early warning.
Exactly. Think about a standard doctor's office intake form. On a scale of 1 to 10, what is your pain? They expect a clean numerical answer.
Right.
But for someone with delayed interoception, their internal scale is calibrated in a completely foreign language. They might not realize they're at an 8 until they're at a 10 and literally collapsing in the waiting room.
Or think about an HR department requiring an employee to request a specific accommodation, like, I don't know, a quiet workspace.
Yeah, that's a perfect example.
But that whole model is just completely rigged. I mean, if we look at the neurology and the delayed routing we just discussed, that system requires the physical need to be translated into verbal language while the person still has the cognitive capacity to speak.
Yes.
For an autistic person experiencing these delays, how can they ask HR for a quiet room when their body doesn't even tell them the office noise is draining their spoons until they're already having a meltdown?
They can.
By the time they actually know what they need, the capacity for words is already gone.
And by the time the need is physically urgent enough to be recognized by the individual, the outside world, the boss, the doctor, the teacher, they think it's a sudden emergency.
Right. They think it just came out of nowhere.
They think it's an overreaction out of nowhere.
Yeah.
But Dr. Hoerricks confirms this beautifully. She says it wasn't sudden. It was late.
Wow.
There's a massive difference between the two. The body is an unreliable witness, yes, but it is not lying. It is simply reporting on the facts through neurological systems that do not synchronize with public time.
That is such a crucial distinction.
So when institutions demand that a person know every need early and name it clearly before their capacity disappears, they are essentially building a world exclusively for bodies whose signals arrive on a perfect, predictable schedule.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener, right now? I mean, taking all of this in, the takeaway has to be a radical shift in how we observe and judge each other. We have to stop punishing people for the timing of their biological signals. We have to recognize the profound, invisible, and honestly exhausting effort it takes to navigate a physical world without a reliable internal map. And without an internal clock that matches the rhythm of the rest of society.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, Dr. Hoerricks makes this ultimate plea that really shifts the goalposts of what we consider a success in this context.
Oh, so?
The real achievement isn't an autistic person somehow white-knuckling their way through, overcoming their body and successfully acting like a neurotypical person.
Right. That shouldn't be the goal.
The real achievement, as she beautifully puts it, is simply receiving the delayed message from your body whilst there is still time to be kind to yourself.
Time to be kind. That is incredibly powerful.
It really is.
And honestly, a much better metric for success. It leaves me with a thought that I really want to pass on to you to mull over after this deep dive ends. Dr. Hoerricks asks a piercing question at the end of her piece. What kind of culture calls a perfectly timed bodily signal maturity instead of just calling it look?
That's a great question.
So as you go through your day-to-day, look around at the physical spaces you inhabit. Look at your workplace, your schools, your public transit. Look at how a doctor's intake form is designed or how your company actually handles HR requests.
Yeah, really look at them.
How much of our built environment and how many of our daily casual judgments of other people are rooted in this exact same biological arrogance? Are we inadvertently building a world that only offers grace to bodies that run on perfectly synchronized clocks? And what happens to the people whose eviction notices arrive disguised as spam, completely out of their control?
Something to really think about.
Absolutely. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into The Body Told Me Late. We'll catch you next time.
Thank you for listening.